Hi there, everyone. My name is Ariel, and my presentation this week will be focusing on Ata Aidoo's No Sweetness Here and Other Stories. And I know that several people read My Sister Killjoy, and I was actually opting to read My Sister Killjoy initially, and then when I got put or when I signed up for the other stories, No Sweetness Here, I was very pleasantly surprised how rich the tradition is within Adu's stories. So I hope that you enjoy. So Ama Ata Adu, here she is, and she is a Ghana author, and so she also wrote My Sister Killjoy, and she is a predominant, of course, voice in post-colonial Ghana literature, and these are just some of her portraits and a couple of quotes. I particularly was drawn to a young girl's voice doesn't break, it gets firmer. And I think that that kind of sets the stage for a lot of the conversations that she starts in her pieces, specifically about the language and the voice. So I'm taking the angle of looking at the idea of oral storytelling in Adu's work and the literary tropes that she uses in order to expose social truths. And I thought that it was really interesting in her work in particular, and that we've discussed some different pieces, Belly Woman Bangering, for example, that focus on a lot of performativity and dramatic constructs. I find that there's a little bit of a different kind of cadence to Adu's work. And so some of the things that she focuses in on is how the language itself is transforming the meaning. So here is a little video from her.
My point is that when a woman has been socialized into, I don't want to use the word oppressed, right? But when a woman has been put under pressure, when she's been socialized into a certain space, and she is being that woman in that space, that doesn't mean that, that's all there is to her. My problem with seeing African women on, the quintessentially world oppressed and so on and so forth, is that it removes any agency from African women, as if we are just there, to be oppressed, to make babies. And mind you, if you don't mind my saying it, excuse me, I mean, it's not all African societies that practice female genital mutilation. And Africa is not the only place where it is done.
Sure, it happens in the Middle East as well.
Yes,
okay, so you have said that you're very averse to this Western perception that the African
world
female...
perception.
World perception that the African female is a downtrodden wretch. You're also seen as the perhaps paramount African feminist. Do you describe yourself as a feminist?
I am a feminist, yeah.
And you don't think that's a bit of a loaded term that's associated with the 1970s women's liberation movement, women burning their bras in Western capitals?
So what if they were burning their bras? I mean, the feminists, if you say that, a feminist is just somebody, not necessarily a woman, who believes in the potential of women to get to the highest possible level of development, given the facilities a society makes available. I mean, just as any man. And being a feminist is not necessarily being a woman feminist. Feminism is an ideology, like socialism, like Pan-Africanism. So, a man too can be a feminist.
Do you believe then that feminism is feminism regardless of wherever you live in the world, whether it's Norway or Nigeria, or do you believe that there is an African feminism more strongly rooted in the social traditions and culture of these countries?
I certainly do believe, it is...
What, that there is an African feminism?
Well, I mean, I think there is an African feminism that does not go around describing itself as an African feminism. What I'm trying to say is that feminism is an ideology an ideology, and it depends how it is formulated or how it is negotiated depends upon the details of the particular environment.
Okay, and I apologize if my camera has come off. Just having a couple of issues with my camera actually switching off and on in strange situations. However, like there are a couple things that I just wanted to like kind of call everybody's attention to. One is Adu is specifically referencing a lot of concepts in like African feminism. She doesn't specifically say double colonization, but she does imply some of the same constructs, especially about like the Western perception. I love when she says like what are we just meant to be oppressed to make babies? And I love the idea of like recapturing agency. And so if you listen to some of her like vocabulary and cadence, she has a very interesting like rhythm of speech. It's very up and down. There's a lot of rhetorical questioning. There's a lot of like communal address. She has a very theatrical pacing style, and it does the way that she speaks does come out quite clearly in her writing as well. And so these are just kind of some concepts that come out in this collection of short stories. So there's No Sweetness here, which is obviously the title, but we have other really powerful pieces here, like The Message and stories of different aspects of women's relationships, not only with men, but with other women in their communities. So, some concepts that come out here, we've got storytelling as a way to critique the society. We've got public rituals, tragic reversals, which I'll talk about momentarily. We've got the idea of like almost like a callback to Greek chorus. I know that we've discussed like Alcestis and its impact on Adufa. And so we have a little bit of that in here and like Greek chorus construct. There's also this idea of like gossip and this like the vocals of the community kind of coming in to like tell the stories of those around them. And then of course there's double colonization and this call and response dialogue, and the double colonization piece definitely comes out pretty clearly in New Sweetness here, so we'll talk about that soon. And I just found that all of these tropes in the work really come together to make this really beautiful story of just community value and community voice, and the idea of like building a better society based on the people around you and who is uplifting you. No Sweetness here doesn't really get to that, but some of the other pieces do. And so I just really love this piece. This is a very famous quote by, and I don't remember the name of the scholar. So let me go back for one moment. Okay, it's Florence Stratton and Anne Adams, and they created this lovely line that's pretty well known to describe Adu's work, which is she speaks in English but thinks in Akan. And so we have this communal voice and this idea of a Greek chorus and breaking the fourth wall. And all of these things kind of come together to like create this feeling of being in a communal space with these women. All right, so here's one piece to kind of pull together some of these concepts. So this is the idea of the call and response communal voice. And so this is the gossip of the village women in the message. And the message is one of the pieces that preludes No Sweetness here, which is the piece that's most often referenced in her work. It's very well known. It's also framed in an interesting way, and so a lot of the scholars that I was reading, especially Adams, and then there are a couple of pieces that I reference in my works cited, but they really talk a lot about this idea of like a wave in and out of like all of these different concepts surrounding Adu and like their community. And so the the no sweetness here is kind of in the center and it's framed around these other types of stories, and so it's this really interesting like dip into the different aspects of these social constructs. So this one is the message, and so this one really leans in heavily on dialogue as a way to represent communal voice. In the village the air was heavy, thick with the weight of a somber conversation that passed from mouth to mouth like a dark cup. The women gathered by the eaves, their voice rising and falling in a rhythmic, communal lament. You, whispered one, her hands pressed to her cheeks, they say the news from the coast is bitter. They say the white coat men at the hospital have opened her up, Essia and Foa, opened up like a sack of grain. Another shook her head and dust from the yard coating of her feet. Pooh, pity, a traumatic childbirth for one so young. And now the rumors say she is held by the surgery, her life a flickering lamp in the high wind. Who are we to be to the city people but voices in the wind? To the collective, Essie's pain was not a private matter. It was a communal weight, a tragedy that threatened the very continuity of the village line. And it's just so beautiful, this idea of like all the voices being in the wind. And this is just a very pointed piece in the message. But look here, my sister, it should not be said, but they opened her up. They opened her up. Yes, opened her up. And the baby removed. Yes, the baby removed. And it's this beautiful call and response of just like, how do we like heal from this traumatic childbirth? It's not just about this like one person, but it's also like a communal voice. So then we move on to the title piece, which is no sweetness here, and it's quite sad story, but it's beautiful. I've never read it before. We have Mami Ama, and she is a lovely devoted mother to Kwesi, her son, and she is going through a divorce. And so at this time, we have some social critique about some patriarchal constructs. We've got some issues around being like these institutions, these Western institutions like marriage. And I mean, marriage isn't entirely a Western institution, but this kind of idea of like the woman being kind of shackled to a man, and her husband has other wives and she's been neglected and she wants the best for her son. And so, just as she reclaims her agency through divorce, Kwesi is bitten by a snake and dies. And it's just this tragic moment of just like she sacrifices so much of herself to make a beautiful life for her son, and then he's just gone. And I wanted to call your attention to this piece. I love this page. I just think it's a beautifully written piece, and if you listen to it, just the cadence is just absolutely stunning. Do not speak, his father's youngest sister broke in. We have lost a treasure. My daughter, said the grandmother again, Kwesi is gone, gone forever with our forefathers. And what can we do? What can we do indeed? When flowers scattered in the sand, who can sift it? But this, the one saddest I've heard, that he was his mother's only one. Is that so? Another visitor cried. I always thought she had other children. What does one do when one's only water pot breaks? She whispered, and the question was left hanging in the air. No one dared say anything more. I went out. I never knew how I got there, but I saw myself approaching Mami Ama's hut. As usual, the door was open. I entered the outer room. She was not there. Only sheep and goats from the village were busy munching at the cassava and the yams. I looked into the inner chamber. She was there, still clad in the cloth she had worn to the divorce proceedings. And she was not sitting, standing, or lying down. She was kneeling, and like one drowning who catches at a straw, she was clutching Kwesi's books in school uniform to her breast. Mami Ama, I call out to her, and she did not move. It's just so powerful. Like just this idea of like this observation of just the strongest grief imaginable, and like how do you heal from this? But there's also this communal aspect of it. You heal through other people supporting. And so, kind of to wrap up my video here, is that orality as the voice of the double colonized is kind of my angle that I wanted to take here. And so some of the most key prominent scholars that have been referenced are Craig Tapping, who talks about the voice of an excited storyteller marking intonations and technical conventions of open or free verse and its denoted terminals. And that's just something that Ogede references as kind of like a basis in like Adoo's tropes. Then Florence Stratton and Anne Adams are referenced in some of the other literary journals. This is in Getene, but noted that speak in English but think in Akan, which is a technique that allows her to saturate prose with Ghanaian idioms and speech rhythms. And then, of course, academic Ogede explains that Adoo aims to achieve a textual representation that draws on the aesthetics of orality, utilizing the framework of village gossip to drive her narratives, which I find to be just a really interesting, specific angle of like a technique to tell these stories of these women. And of course, lastly, and both of these pieces by Ogede and Kumar were published in the International Journal of English Studies, but they focus on how the narratives mimic the tonal rhythms and dialogic forms of oral performance, privileging native epistemologies over systems derived from the West. And I feel that that is where a lot of the power of her work comes into play. Right. And so, leaving this presentation, some things that I just would like to leave with everybody to think about is, in what ways do you see women's bodies treated as a commodity in these pieces, especially in pieces by African women and Adu? How does Adoo's use of indigenous speech patterns resist colonial language hierarchies? And so, how is like utilizing those techniques that she's known for change the way that we perceive literature or literary value? And also, how do institutions like marriage or custody function as mechanisms of patriarchal control and the idea of the double colonization? And those are some things that I'm left thinking about. And so I hope that it gives you something to think about in regards to Adoo's work and other work by African women. And so here are some of my sources, and they are also posted in the resource slide. I apologize if my camera never came back on, but I hope that you were still able to hear all of my comments. Thank you all.